Today, my guest is Professor Zeynep Aycan. I'll keep my introduction short to maximize our time with her. In the next 30 minutes or so, we'll talk about Zeynep as a person. Professor Aycan is a thought leader and an esteemed scholar, and finally is a mentor to many PhD students and junior faculty. For the sake of time, I will skip many of her accomplishments and give you a very quick snapshot. Professor Aycan is a fellow of the Association for Psychological Sciences and the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology, SIOP. She received the 2016 American Psychological Association Global Psychology Book Award, the 2019 Best Paper Award from the Human Resource Management Journal, and the 2015 Management and Leadership Textbook of the Year Award from the Chartered Management Institute. The 2019 Gordon Allport Intergroup Relations Prize by Study of Social Issues, and the Caroline Dexter Award from the AOM. She's a member of the Science Academy of Turkey and the prestigious TUBITAK Science Award in 2014. Thank you, Zeynep, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
First question, what did you want to become when you were a child?
It's hard to say, Ilgaz, because I didn't have any specific profession in mind, but I can tell you that I was a very, very curious child, extremely curious, and I was investigative in my approach. I mean, I loved puzzles, not really jigsaw puzzles only, but any type of puzzle, any type of kind of a suspense issues, you know, a lot of investigative issues, you know, keep coming back to me. So I think these days they say inquisitive mind. I think that's what, you know, can summarize my childhood. For example, I used to cut the seeds of plants to see what is inside them, or occasionally my father used to bring different internal parts of animals as delicacies. So for example, I used to cut the kidneys, I used to cut the brain of animals and what have you to see what is inside. So I remember these things. I also enjoyed knowing about how people live in different parts of the world. Especially, I was very much intrigued by Aboriginal people for some reason. I don't know. I had few books about, Aboriginal family, interacting with kids. You know, these were children books and what have you. Of course, I didn't know how to read at the time, but I keep looking at them, looking at their pictures. I was fascinated by their, you know, interaction with among themselves, how they treat nature, how nature is part of their identity. I don't know. I mean, these were some signs, maybe early signs about what I became, maybe.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Turkey, in Istanbul.
Istanbul.
But I had another identity. I'm one of the hyphenated identity, people with hyphenated identities. I became Canadian citizen while doing my PhD. And I'm very, very proud of that identity as well. So I'm Turkish Canadian, but for the most part, I was born and raised and educated in Turkey and did my PhD and postdoc in Canada.
Very interesting. What is the earliest point of domestic versus international difference? You mentioned you're looking at native societies and you say like, oh, this is a different culture. What was the first moments that you remember?
Interesting. I mean, I was a child of parents, you know, my mom was British, my dad was Pakistani. Only they weren't, actually, they weren't, but it felt like they were. I mean, later on, you know, as I understood differences in cultures, I now kind of label them as, you know, one being British, the other being Pakistani, because the cultural differences was that much. You know, as a child, I was able to observe those differences, and there were, you know, it wasn't about personality type of differences. Even at an early age, I gathered that it wasn't a personality type of difference. They were very well educated, both of them, you know, graduates of university, economics department. They were urban, actually, but coming from the western part of Turkey, the other coming from the eastern part of Turkey. And I, as a child, always observed the kind of the east-west difference, so to speak, individualism, collectivism. You know, later on, of course, I was able to label them label in a way like, make sense of those interactions or different patterns of behavior as individualism and collectivism. So it was within my family, I actually experienced cross-cultural differences, even though my parents did not come from different countries, but definitely different cultural backgrounds cultural backgrounds within Turkey, regional differences. And I consider them as a cross-cultural difference. It was a cross-cultural family, literally, in my mind. Now I reflect back, and I definitely, still label them as a cross-cultural couple. They're alive. Yeah, I still do.
Fascinating. I mean, not many people can pinpoint it so clearly. I mean, your cross-cultural study is basically started when you were a child. This is fascinating. How did you choose academia, and how did you choose a particular area in academia?
So that, in my university years, I was, one of my courses was cross-cultural psychology by late Çiğdem Kağıtçıbaşı, who was a very well-known cross-cultural psychologist, very, world-renowned actually. She passed away 3 years ago. She was my mentor actually. So it was her course. As I said, like it was the course of cross-cultural psychology. And at the very first week, I had this aha moment. I said, this is it. This is exactly what I want to do. This is exactly what I'm experiencing in my family, in my environment, two families actually interacting with each other. Also people around me, when I look at the differences of behaviors and values and, norms and what have you, I said, okay, so like culture is something that makes sense out of these differences and interaction patterns and sometimes conflicts and what have you. So that was it. Ilgaz, Çiğdem's class. I said, this is it. This is absolutely what I want to do with my life. Perfect.
Something that is not on your CV that some people might find interesting, something unique about yourself.
I think pretty much people know about me, but I don't know. I'm very much interested in arts. I have different hobbies related to arts. I also try to be connected to my inner self. I had been practicing mindfulness meditation for many years, since I was 18 actually. So I think that is not written in my CV, and it's a big part of who I am.
Perfect. And if you stop doing what you're doing today, what's the second best alternative career path for you?
I mean, it should be definitely arts, because artists are, they need to be in touch with their inner self, their deeper self, the inner core, to produce art. Actually, everybody has to, but in their case, or in the case of the career of art, they're free to do so. Let's put it that way. They're free-minded, free-spirited. They're not constrained by, any limitations, any norms surrounding their profession and what have you. I love their free-spirited nature. I love their connectedness with themselves and creativity, of course. I mean, freedom to be creative is something that I absolutely envy. So that would have been my alternative career. Any kind of art form I would like to exercise. I do it as a hobby, but I wanted to be a proper artist for sure.
Perfect. Regrets. Have you got any regrets?
I don't think so. I mean, I might have. I mean, I wish maybe I double majored in anthropology, doing what I do. It would have been an excellent source of wisdom coming from anthropology if I had properly studied it rather than just reading about it. I would have also maybe liked to do my master's in cultural studies, interdisciplinary field of cultural studies. It would have made me a more well-versed and well-rounded person, scholar and person, I think. I wish I had the formal trainings in these fields.
Okay, learning from failure. What was your biggest failure or one of the failures, and what did you learn from it?
I had a lot of failures actually as a child. I wasn't a star performer at school. I was okay. And I didn't officially failed any classes or any, I didn't repeat any years and what have you, but I was a kind of a mediocre performer at school. Well, mainly because the constraints of the system and the harshness of competition and assessment approaches did not really fit me well anyways. So I had a lot of failures. I wasn't able to get into the university in the first year of entry, and did not perform well in standardized tests and what have you. Academically, I experienced failures, and also, of course, in the professional life as an academician, receiving rejections, of course, is part of our life. Obviously, that I experienced a lot, and I still do. But I think one of the major, looking back, I don't consider them as failures now. It was a learning opportunity, growing opportunity. Of course, these are all things that we know, but I think my biggest mistake, I wouldn't say maybe failure, but mistake was judging my self-worth via these failures or via the successes or via my professional identity, thinking that it is who I am. Which I realized that it wasn't actually. So that was the biggest mistake we all fall into. And my current attempt, of course, or my current, my current effort is to understand that this is not who I am, and this is not who you are, and this is not who anybody is actually. So confining myself with those identities, work identity, family identity, thinking that it is, these are the things that define me, which I now realize that it
perfect. And something that you're most proud of?
I think I'm proud of having this very strong inner compass, if it makes sense. I mean, I don't know how it come about, but I do have a very strong inner compass. I think able to navigate my life according to my own inner compass. It's hard to define sometimes. And therefore, I'm not easily, I don't easily get distracted by the imposed norms of the society, of the family, or of the academia, for example. So, like Sinatra said, at the end of my life, I wish I would also be able to say I did it my way, because that's exactly what I have been doing. So I think I'm quite proud of that. I also don't pay much attention to the outcomes of my work. It can be failures, it can be successes. I have a growth mindset, using Carol Dweck's terminology. I have a growth mindset. I really seek learning rather than like any outcome that I can have or I cannot have. It's much less important for me, and I'm quite pleased with that.
Beautiful. Let's switch to research. And
sure.
The first question that I ask is, imagine yourself stranded in a pub. Locals don't know about you. They are curious what you do. They're asking questions. So how do you explain yourself, what you work on? And how do you explain why this research is important? What do you say? What is your research about?
This is a kind of a tough question, because I do research in different domains. They all involve cross-cultural, comparisons, but mainly in three areas I do research. The impact of culture on human resource management practices, one, the other is leadership, and the third one is work-life balance. So, and I was quite liberal, if I can say, like, as I said, following my inner compass, I was just doing research on whatever issue that I was interested in. So they look very patchy, if you like. They look unrelated to one another, but the 25th year of my career, let's put it that way. When I reflect back and see all of these different things that I do, I think the common thread among them is empowerment, I think. I would like to call myself an empowerment researcher. Why is this important to me? Because it is about discovering the power of individual, basically. Knowing how powerful you are to shape your life, to shape the environment that you're in. You know, it's about self-leadership, basically, I think. And yeah, I would say empowerment in all areas. That is the underlying theme. Not very
Perfect.
visible, but it's what I believe to be.
Zeynep, I want to ask two related questions. One is, what are the omitted variables in international business, international management research related to your area, cross-cultural management, obviously?
Yeah.
And what's the next 5 to 10 years of the field? What are going to be the next big questions for junior faculty, for the PhD students to work on?
So I think, so cross-cultural management, okay, so this is my main area, let's put it that way. And in there, of course, lots of developments have happened, wonderful, you know, steps have been taken to identify, you know, the ways in which different cultures differ. The ways in which cultures differ, fine. I mean, there are many theoretical frameworks or models to identify dimensions, so-called dimensions of culture, along which, you know, human societies differ. That's wonderful. We now, I think, have a very good idea as to, you know, in what ways we differ. But we don't know what to make out of these differences quite yet. In other words, we don't know how to manage these differences. What happens when that interface between two culturally different individuals or groups or organizations, for example, come together? We don't have sufficient know-how in this area. I think this should be the next thing for us to discover. We need to develop models. We need to develop conceptual frameworks or theories to describe the modes of this interface among individuals from different cultures. And the other thing that I think we should invest on much more in the age of Anthropocene, especially, is the green behavior. Green leadership across cultures. We cannot, I mean, no scientific inquiry, not only in business, but across the board, no scientific inquiry can afford to skip this question anymore. I mean, we're beyond the point where we can, you know, we can just skip, you know, environmental issues. We just cannot. So I think as cross-cultural management scholars or IB scholars, we need to understand the green behavior in organizations.
About the process of creativity, I usually ask this question: what does your mind think of when it wanders freely in a state of idle curiosity? Where do these ideas come from? How do your ideas come from, or where do they come from?
This is what I always advise my students. You know, when they try to, or junior faculty for that matter, when they try to find a topic for study, they typically look at the literature. They say, oh, Hocam, let me, Hocam means teacher, by the way. Oh, let me, you know, read the literature and come back and let's, you know, then we talk about my dissertation topic and what have you. I say, okay, don't do that first. Observe your environment, observe things around you, especially with relation to lives of working people. and what intrigues you, what is counterintuitive to you. Okay, never mind if it is in the literature or not. Okay, never mind if it is previously studied or not. Even if it's not studied previously, it's all the better, actually. So don't worry about, you cannot find anything in the literature about it. That's exactly where you should pursue your research to fill this gap. But just look around and try to find counterintuitive behaviors. Counterintuitive in the sense that it's not captured in the literature. It's not linear. It is something, it's something counter to the causality that you have in mind. For example, try to find those episodes. It can be from the movies that you watch. It can be from the internet surf or social media interaction. It doesn't matter where it comes from. But first of all, find those interesting, very original in the sense of counterintuitive ideas, but also those among those, which ones are close to your heart, which ones are personally appealing to you. So that's where the creativity comes from. In other words, I want my students to say, to find areas where people would not dare to talk about. And I want them to say, hey, the king is naked, the king is naked. And that hasn't been said by anyone before. I dare to say it because it is true. I may be the only one to say it, but I'm saying it. So that's where creativity comes from to me.
Zeynep, I'm curious. Among all the papers you've written, the books you've written, the talks you've given, which one was the most favorite one? The one that you would think of it as like your child, your firstborn, the most precious one?
Favorite to me or favorite to the audience?
Favorite to you.
Favorite to me. I think paternalistic leadership, Ilgaz, because it was counterintuitive. It was counterintuitive in the sense that I think I was maybe one of the few, because at the time, myself and one other group of Chinese scholars were working on paternalistic leadership. And we were saying, quite unknown to one another, independently, we were arguing that this is an effective leadership in some cultural context. So, yeah, I think that would be my first child.
Perfect. Let's switch to mentoring and advice section. I normally ask about what you learned. What was the best advice you received from your mentor? And what was the best advice you received when you were growing up, when you were being a scholar, about scholarship, about being a professor?
This is interesting, and I don't want to imply that I didn't have mentors. I did. Chidam was one of them. John Berry was my PhD advisor. Another one, Rabi Kanungo. And later on in my professional life, I had the opportunity to work with Nancy Adler very closely. So I adopted her as my mentor actually later on anyways. So they were all wonderful, wonderful people. But they had a more like a laissez-faire approach in their leadership or mentorship to me. Let's put it that way. They did not, how should I mean, I don't want to sound like, they didn't guide me or anything, but they gave me the space. They gave me the space to do self-discovery, to do self-learning. And I do consider myself as a self-taught person. So did I receive an advice that I can never forget? I don't think so. I probably don't think so. Maybe they trusted me so much. They didn't interfere with what I do, how I grow. They were just excellent role models. I mean, their life was my biggest advice. Their work, their integrity, their personality, their creativity, their courage was my best advice.
Beautiful. And in your experience, looking at the junior faculty or the students, PhD students, what are some of the top common mistakes that you see? Things that they do that they shouldn't, therefore the advice that you will give to young scholars?
I think nowadays young people in general are more mature compared to what I was at their age, at their stage, to receive feedback. So I love their maturity, level of maturity to receive feedback, to receive negative feedback, to receive criticism, to self-reflect, and and what have you. So this is wonderful. So I admire them for doing so. But of course, the ongoing problem, I think, which is, I think it is a problem in our field, in our profession, which is being an academic, is the pervasive imposter syndrome, Ilgaz, pervasive imposter syndrome, thinking that we're never enough, we don't know enough, the other person knows much better than we do, we can never be like this, like you, like me, stuff like that. So that is, I mean, if they need to work on something, I would recommend that they work on their imposter syndrome, because this is a big barrier to their creativity, to just letting go and getting connected with the deep knowledge, that they can get, because that gives them a lot of worry, and worry is, or anger, self-anger. And these are counterproductive things, unfortunately. So, but yeah, that's their biggest mistake. That's our biggest problem and mistake, if you like, pitfall that we fall all the time. Yeah, I would say work on them.
But it's reasonable. The expectation is reasonable. I mean, I'm interviewing, for example, I interviewed two of my mentors. One of them is one of the biggest names in IB, the other one is biggest names in strategy. They average a citation a minute. So,
sure.
How can you reach that? You feel inadequate
Sure.
quite often. Last question. What should I have asked you but haven't so far?
You could have asked, let's see, because we typically, I mean, people who are in any leadership position, organizational leadership, academic leadership, mentorship, and what have you, typically talk about how they develop others and, how they mentor others and what have you. But nobody really talks about how do you develop, how do you grow, what do you do to invest in your own growth, ongoing growth. I mean, there is this idea that, okay, you're done, okay, so you're so successful, you're done, you cannot learn anymore, you're just basically do whatever you want to do. And nobody thinks that we keep growing, we keep learning new things, we keep stretching our boundaries and what have you, and challenging ourselves. We keep doing that. So that would have been a question. How do you keep evolving? How do you keep developing? How do you keep growing professionally and personally? Would that have been a great question?
Oh, here you go. I'm asking you.
Another time, I can tell you. How about that?
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time, Zeynep.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I learned a lot. I'm sure the others will agree with me.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks.
Bye.